Hi everyone and welcome to another 12 journals of 2016 where I make a journal page based on Tim's 12 tags of 2016 challenge. You can see his tag that was the original inspiration for this page, and you can see Tim's original inspiration and where I ended up on my journal page. So those of you that don't know, this is a series of journal pages. I am a little bit behind and I'm trying to catch up, hence I'm doing July in September. And you can see how it's gone so far. So each month Tim, on his challenge 12 tags of 2016, makes a tag based on different techniques that he's mixing up this year. And I'm doing a page based on those tags because I've got so many tags I don't know what to do with them. So each of my tags has a picture of his tags. This is the inspiration for the month of July, and I will use the inspiration and some of his techniques to create the page that I'm about to show you. So this is a flick through March, April, this is May, so April's missing still, and you can see how my pages are joining together and they each have a little tag inside where I display the original inspiration and something else which you'll see a little bit more of later on. So that's where I'm at the moment. So you can see I've got a few pages to catch up, so a few videos to make, and this is my video for July. So each of my pages starts out life the same. I've got a tag that measures 6 inches by 5¼ inches and a page that measures 10¼ by 7 inches, and then I, with the page in the landscape position, score at 5 inches, flip the page 180 degrees and score at 5 inches, so that I end up with a 1/4 inch gusset, which will be what I use to attach my pages into my journal when it's all finished, and it also allows me to use more chunky embellishments on my page. So I always start out this process by gathering a few of my Tim Holtz supplies. Now, I'm not saying that I've got the most supplies in the world, but I've got a few, and there's always bits and pieces that he's used that I can use to make a tag based on the things that he's showing us that particular month. So I actually did have one of the stamps, which is in this stamp set here. So I've got the world stamp that he used on his tag. I think this is a bigger version because I think he must have used a smaller one on his tag. And I just got a few elements. You might see me use them, you might not. And I know for a fact that even though I got out these rub-ons and these ephemera pack, I didn't actually use them on the finished page. So I'm starting with a couple of the stamps that I want to use. I want to create a border down each edge of my page because that highlights where the tags will be sat once this journal is all put together. And I'm thinking of using this compass stamp as well as the world stamp because this page is going a bit along a travel theme, as you will see. So I don't have a long enough acrylic block to put this stamp on, so I'm going to use my Tim Holtz ruler. I think that'll work, and I'm going to be using archival ink throughout. So this is a black archival ink, also by Ranger, and the reason I'm using archival is because I want it to be permanent. I'm going to be using sort of wet mediums with this, and we're going to be doing kind of a resist technique. So I'm just making sure that this stamp is as central as I can make it on the edge of the page. I'm not going to bother lining it up and then doing another one. This suits my purposes fine. I'm happy with that, and I'm going to stamp exactly the same on the opposite edge. So I'm just being a little bit careful to try and be clean in amongst my stamping so that I don't end up with a huge mess on my page. I'm quite prone to smudging when I'm stamping, so I'm trying to be neat and tidy as I start. So you can see I'm using my craft mat to catch the excess as I'm stamping off the page, and that makes it, except for when you miss and get it on your craft mat anyway, it makes it a little bit easier to clean up. And I'm also going to do the exact same stamp across the top of my tag, and remembering this time that I need to do both sides, as we will be able to see both sides of the tag itself. So I'm just laying down the foundations of my design to start with, and this is where I'm going to place the world. And I'm also going to, on the opposite page, just slightly off, just deciding where to put it, the gorgeous compass stamp. I like these blueprint stamps. I like all that sort of suggestion of how they were actually put together. So on a spare piece of card, I'm going to stamp this stamp because I want the aeroplane. So I'm going to stamp it twice because I know how I'm going to use those. And then I need to finish off the tags. So stamping the border on the opposite side first, and remember these tags are going to be mostly covered by either a photograph which will be associated with a memory for that particular month, something that springs to mind as I put my page together and I think is appropriate for that particular month. I will be displaying a picture and a memory that I will journal about. So I don't really need this design all over. I just want a little hint of the design around the edges of the tag. So the one side will have the memory and the other side will have a picture of my original inspiration from Tim Holtz. So as I'm going to be showing you a resist technique, the first thing that I need to do is colour in the main elements of my images. So I've picked 3 colours to work with. I want to keep my colour palette limited. So I've got some mowed lawn, faded jeans, and just trying to read this one. I think it's festive berries. Can't quite see it. Still, yeah, festive berries. So I've got a red, a green, and a blue in my distress ink, and I've kept them to the sort of more primary colours. So I'm thinking travel and limiting my colour palette to enable me to have a little bit of a design element as well as colouring in the images that I've got. So I know that I'm going to be colouring in a world, so I definitely needed a kind of blue and green, and I've added the extra colour in the red to bring a few highlights to the colour scheme. So as I fast forward through the colouring in section, I am using my distress inks, which are a water-based ink, and a fine pen in order to colour in my stamped images. You can see I'm using my messy mat or my craft mat as a palette. I've squeezed some ink from the distress ink containers onto my craft sheet, and that acts as a little palette of my ink colours, the ink colours that I'll be using. So the trick is not to use too much water. I've got quite a fine brush because the details on these images is quite small, and I'm carefully colouring in the areas in the colours that I have selected. So it's just like using a paint once you've got it in this format. The ink is transferred to the image with the paintbrush. The more water you use, the more you're likely to get sort of a wash, and the less water that you use, the more true to the original ink colour you will get. So you can see a little bit more wash here. I've got a little bit more water going on in order to colour in the land mass on the world, which of course in this case is the Americas, and then I'm going to colour in the sea. Now the whole idea of this resist technique is so that you can colour in your images, mask over them, and then colour in your backgrounds. And it really is quite a useful technique to be able to use whether you're scrapbooking, journaling, stamping on a card. It's quite a nice technique to think about when you're colouring images for your particular projects. So I'm going to add a little tiny bit of red, being careful not to overload my brush along these little border strips. Now Tim used a wax product to rub over his stamped images to seal off and stop that distress ink being reactivated with the water. Now I don't actually have that product, so I'm going to show you a slightly different technique using a Faber-Castell glaze. And this way I'm going to seal my images by painting over them with the glaze, and then I'll be able to do whatever I like on the background without interfering in with all the time and effort I've spent in colouring in my images. So, as I said before, I'm using a Faber-Castell glaze. You need to make sure that your image is completely dry and also that your brush is dry before you put it into your glaze medium. You could use the Ranger glossy multi-medium to do exactly the same thing, and I would have used that, as I tend to try and use Tim Holtz products or Ranger products when I am using or working on these challenges, but I actually just had the very ends of a pot of the gloss glaze and it got a little bit sticky, so I wouldn't have been able to paint it very well over my images. So you can see I'm just glazing over the actual stamped part of the image. So once this is dry, it will create a resist, not a wrist. It will create a resist and it will stop the background colours going over the coloured images. So I'm also making sure that I leave some of the areas white, but I still need to, in order to keep them white, glaze those areas too. And you can see that best here where I am going around the edge of what was a kind of stamped edging on the image itself. Now it's up to you. If you feel that you've covered all of your elements in one go and that you haven't got any gaps and you've done a really good job, then I would dry this off and then get working on the background. But I like to sort of make doubly sure and give everything a second coat once this first layer of glazing is dry, and that way I make doubly sure that I get a really crisp resist. Now if you wanted a less crisp and a little bit more random, then don't be quite so precise in how you colour your image in with the glaze, and you could have some white areas that were around the edges of your images if you wanted a little bit more of a distressed look. So whilst that second layer of glaze is drying, and you need it to be thoroughly dry before you move on to the next step, I'm just having a good old rummage. So looking at the things that I might use to embellish this page. I really like these brads that you can personalise, these Tim Holtz brads that you can add little stickers to and then little epoxy stickers on top to make your own customised brads. So I was looking in the first instance for little elements that I felt either went with the colour scheme or the theme of travel on this page. So all the time I keep looking back at Tim's tag and thinking, you know, what kind of embellishments inspired him? Would I use those, or do I go in a slightly different direction? So you can see how you can customise these little brads. You can see I'm just rummaging through and seeing what kind of things would look good on my page. So now that glaze is well and truly dry, you can see the gorgeous effect that you can get then when you colour in the background. So I'm going to be using my applicator and I'm going to bring in a slightly lighter blue with one of my most used colours in the Distress Ink range, which is Broken China. And you can see I'm just covering the entire page, and where that glaze is, I don't need to bother about trying to go around it carefully. I'm just going straight over the top, and the ink is not transferring where that glaze is, hence the term resist. It resists the ink, and I'm adding a little bit of the Faded Jeans colour around the top and bottom edges just to frame the page a little. So I'm making sure that I've got plenty of ink and blending those two colours together, and then I'm just splashing on a little bit of water to add a little bit more texture. Coming over that with the kitchen roll, and you can see how it dissipates the ink and allows you to create some splattery effects. I've got one a little bit big there, a really big splatter. I'm just going to cover that over a little bit and add a little bit more blue ink into the mix. Now you could, if you wanted to, stop there and leave that as your background, but I'm going to use my Distress inks and just add some texture into the background with some background stamps. So I did feel at this point that I perhaps should have picked a slightly lighter colour. So I tried to blend it out a little bit with the ink first. That didn't work, so you'll see I come up with another plan, probably one of my more favourite techniques for correcting slight mistakes. So you can see I'm adding that texture to start with, just randomly stamping across my design. You can see I'm not mounting the stamp, and I'm just removing that excess ink with a paper towel where it goes over the images. And then I'm going to get out my trusty gesso. This is the perfect technique for fixing a busy background, a background that you feel might be clashing a little bit too much with your main images rather than complementing them, and that's what I feel is going on here. Not happy with all that stamping, wish I'd never done it, and so now I'm going to knock it all back a little bit. So I'm creating a wash with some gesso, and again it will be resisted by the glaze, and then I'm deliberately sort of pouncing it, so I'm wetting it here because it was a little bit dry, and then removing some of the gesso with my paper towel, and you can see immediately the background has retreated and all that detail has retreated into the background a little bit more than on the right hand side of the layout. So it's up to you. You might like the look on the right, in which case don't add the gesso, but if you just want to knock things back a little bit, this is a great technique for doing that. So depending on how much water you add to your gesso will determine how much of that background you end up covering up. And I do like to use the kitchen roll to remove some of that gesso, because again that adds a little bit of texture in its own right to the background that you're creating. So gesso can also be used to create splatter, so I'm just putting a little bit of that onto my craft mat, watering it down, and in the normal manner, everybody loves a bit of splatter, I'm just going to tap my brush against another little brush handle and create some little white splatter all over my journal page, remembering that everything that I'm doing here to create my background I will be repeating on my tag, and rather than make you sit through that, I will just show you the finished result. Again, whilst everything's wet, I can remove the splatter from the glazed images. Then I'm using some of that Faded Jeans ink and creating some darker splatter across my page. And when you're happy with the amount of splatter that you have, then you can remove any of those splatters from your images and dry everything off. So I'm happy with how that's going. I'm just going to darken the top and bottom edges once more now that I'm happy with the background. As these pages are all little individual works of art, it's always nice to frame them and it draws your eye into the design. So I'm also going to add a black line around the edges, which sort of coordinates with the black stamping that I've got on the page itself. And I'm using a Faber-Castell big brush marker in order to do this, and my Tim Holtz ruler. So just be a little bit careful while the ink is drying that you don't smudge it, but once it's dry it's permanent, and it just sort of finishes off the edges of my page. And the beauty of this is that it does work on that shiny surface because it is a permanent ink. Once it's dry, as long as you don't smudge it while it's drying, it will dry permanently on that glazed edge as well. So remember, when you've got a resist panel on your work, there's always something that you can use to write over it, and it tends to be the permanent markers in your collection, Sharpie pens and things like that. But my preferred pen is a Faber-Castell big brush marker. So because I've lost some of the definition on that blueprint line work, I'm just going back in with a fine pen and adding some of that detail back in. I've got my little aeroplane embellishments which I need to cut out. And they're nicely glazed, so they are going to match the images that are stamped on the page, and it just makes them a little bit more sturdy as well, which is a bonus when you're going to sort of raise them on your page. It just makes them a little bit more sturdy. So I'm starting to think about other embellishments that I might add onto my page. You can see I've got some cogs and brads I'm thinking of adding, and I'm going to add some of the Tim Holtz trim down the very edge of my page, and this matches my colour scheme. It's sort of a red and beigey colour or natural colour, and I'm using thin double-sided tape. This is strong double-sided tape, and you can see I leave a little bit of tape at either edge of the page, and that allows me to wrap that binding over the edge and make sure I get nice neat edges on the braid itself. So you can see I've got a little brad that I've already attached to the compass, and that is holding a little cog into the centre of the compass itself, and then I need to decide where these embellishments will end up. Now I need to repeat all of those background processes on my tag, so I won't make you watch that because it's exactly the same as I created the background on the page itself. So skipping forward a little bit, it's time to add some sewing. So I'm going to use my Tim Holtz ruler and I'm going to create some lines on my journal page that I can stitch over with my sewing machine. So using a pencil and my Tim Holtz ruler, I'm creating an inch size grid, and the reason for doing this is, one, to add the stitch detail which gives a great textural contrast to the page, but also because it would bring in the kind of grid that you would find on a map which relates to the overall design on this page. So I've gone across the page in one direction and now I'm coming back up the opposite way in order to create a grid. Of course, whatever I do on my page, I'm also repeating on my tag. Now I only need to do this on one side. Slight mistake there. And you can see what short work making grids is with a ruler like this one. The Tim Holtz ruler's got that grid and it makes it really easy to get straight lines and make sure that they're all evenly spaced. So as well as the grid, I thought it would be fun to have some kind of flight lines stitched onto my page as well. So I'm just deciding where the little aeroplanes are going to go and then just roughly sketching in their flight path so that I can follow that with the sewing machine. So creating a little bit like a Saturn's ring around the Earth, and my planes will sit on these flight paths. So my tag is up to the same point as my page and I'm ready to stitch. I'm not going to show too much of this process. You can see I'm just following the lines with my sewing machine. Because we've drawn them in, it makes it really easy. Now the things that I found while I was doing this was I needed to make sure, because my card was quite thick, that I was using a sharp needle, otherwise it doesn't like it very much. And I also wanted to make sure to let you know that if you are a sewer of fabric things, don't use the same needle as you are using on your paper craft. Keep a little separate needle just for your paper because it will blunt the needle over time, and the thicker the card, the more sharp your needle will need to be in order to cope with stitching on it. So next you need to decide what to do with the ends of your little stitched grid. So what I did was I wanted to make a feature of them. I didn't want to just completely neaten them and get rid of them. So I'm tying them off at the ends with a couple of knots and then leaving a very short tail just to add a little bit of interest around the edge of my page. Alternatively, if I was just going to trim them straight off, I would just add a little bit of glue along that stitched edge so that the stitches didn't come undone. So a couple of knots and snip away. So I've decided to use foam pads to attach my aeroplanes to my page. I want to give them a little lift from the background. You could accomplish the same, and it probably would be a little bit sturdier if you used a silicone glue, but I'm going for quickness here and adding some foam pads. If I found in the future that they started to peel away, I could add the silicone glue then, and it would dry a little bit more solid and a little bit more robust on your page. I'm also adding the picture of Tim's tag, so my original inspiration, and I think you can see where my inspiration has come from. And I'm just using a pen to add a couple of faux stitched lines around my image so that it just makes it match a little bit the stitch detail that I've already got on the tag. And this is where you really start to see your design take shape as you add those final embellishments. So I'm going to need to add my other little aeroplane, and I'm going to put him in position flying around the world. And it was at this point that I kind of got a little bit of Disney inspiration, because that was where we spent our last holiday. We've been really lucky to be able to go there a couple of times, and I decided that that's what I was going to journal about on this page whilst I was making it. So you can see things will start to take a different approach now that that little idea is in my head. So I'm adding some stars, and these are again embellishments from the Tim Holtz range. And the tops of my tags all have the date for the year, so this is the July page, so I'm going to be putting with these little tiny stickers July 2016, and I do add a little bit of glue under these to make sure that they stick down, mainly because they're going to be these tags are going to come in and out of the pocket. I don't want to inadvertently flick them off, and also I'm sticking here onto the shiny surface of the resist that we created. So that's how that will sit in the pocket once this journal is all put together. So another of the techniques Tim used on his tag was to create little word strips using his dies, and he used the positives and the negatives of his die sets in order to create a nice look on the bottom of his tag. So I'm going to do a similar thing, except I've used my Cricut or Cricut, depending on how you like to say it, to cut out my quote for my page. So I'm going with "Travel broadens your horizons," and I've got two of them where I'm using the negative space of what I've cut out, which are these two words, and the other two words are going to be these little itty bitty letters which I am just taking off the cutting sheet. And you can see I'm using the same technique as I used on the edge of the page, just to draw a border around my two word strips to make sure that they are framed nicely once they are attached to the page. And then I'm going to attach them with some PVA glue to my layout. And you can see how neatly that these fit into the grid. Now I would like to take credit for that and say that I planned it all along, but it was just luck. Just luck that I happened to trim them to the right size and that they happen to fit exactly into the grid. So I should take credit really, but it's not true. And then I'm going to stick my little letters onto the page. So I think things are really nicely taking shape. Next, because I was sort of thinking along the Disney route for my tag, I found and remembered I had in my stash this little Mickey Brad. So I'm using a big bite crocodile to put that, I hope if my geography is good enough, roughly in the place we find Disney World in Florida. And I've popped that as like a marker on the map of my destination on this little journey on a page. Now you will have seen before, if you've watched these videos, that I need to create a pocket for a tag in between each of the pages. And if ever you're doing this, say on a scrapbook page or something similar, an art journal page, I always create a little U shape with a couple of strips of card, depending on how thick the tag is that I'm going to insert in the pocket. So because things are quite chunky on this page, I'm going to add 3 thin strips of card along the bottom edge and the top and bottom edge of the page. And that will enable me, when I join the pages together, to create a pocket with a little bit of depth so that the tags that I put in them slide in and out easily. These strips are about 1/4 of an inch in width and they form a little U shape. And don't forget to use glue rather than double-sided tape and avoid the fold line of the gusset of the page. Then I realised that I've got a couple of brads on this page, and this side will be joined to another page where a tag will be going in and out. So I want to avoid the tag catching on the brad. So I'm just going to stick a little paper plaster over each of the brads that I've used on this page. And the reason that I'm using glue rather than double-sided tape for both of these things, the U-shaped pocket margins and these little masks or plasters over the brads, is because double-sided tape has a tendency to cause a sticky edge where you use it, and again you don't want your tag catching on these edges. It might catch a little bit on the paper, but it would catch even more on the brad. Just looking for my June page. I know that I've done it, so that's here, and I'm just going to add the U shape as if by magic to this side of the page, and then I'm ready to join 2 pages together and show you exactly how that's done. So again, I'm using the glue for the same reasons that I explained just a moment ago. It avoids, once the glue is dry, any sticky edges on those strips to catch on your tag as you put it in and out of the pocket. Spend a little bit of time making sure that this all lines up, making sure your spines are all in alignment and that your page edges are in alignment, and then give it a good press down. And don't forget, don't add your tag until you're sure your glue is dry. So just having a little test to make sure that I haven't got any glue and that the tag still fits, and then whilst that's drying I'm going to remove the tag. And obviously I won't be able to add, tissue's just coming away a little bit there, I won't be able to add the July tag until I make August's page. So a few more finishing touches. So the tag is almost done. I need to add a loop so that the tag can easily be removed from the pocket, and I'm going to do that with this little bit of ribbon. And I'm just adding a bit of glue to each end of the ribbon to make sure that it doesn't undo, because it's quite an open weave. I don't want it to start to fray, and that glue dries clear, so I should have no problems with that once it's dry. And then I decided to make a little Disney inspired brad, so using one of the Tim Holtz brads, but this time I'm going to make my own sticker. So I used the epoxy sticker and placed it over the image that I wanted on my brad, and then I'm going to cut around the epoxy sticker. So I'm using it as a kind of template to get the right size, and I've got Mickey's face on this one, and actually I think that was Donald's face. I think this one might be Mickey's face, or the other way around, I'm not sure. But either way, I've got 2 Disney characters in what will be my brads that I'm going to secure the ribbon with to the top of the tag. So on this side, I'm going to cut off the little arms of the brad because I don't want them poking through to the other side, and I will use this. I'm just trimming the little handles of the other brad down a little bit so they fit underneath, and this will stop those arms catching on your hands when you're taking this tag in and out. So just secure that by putting a little bit of weight on top while the glue dries. And then I noticed I've got quite a little hole underneath this Mickey Mouse brad, so I'm going to pop a little picture behind, and I've got another character from the stickers that fits perfectly peeping through that brad. So those of you keeping up with this series know that I've decided on each of my tags to think of something that that particular month inspired or reminded me of, and I'm going to include a picture and some form of journaling in order to make that page relevant to me. So it's a little bit of scrapbooking in with my art journaling, and I quite often not quite sure what I'm going to put as I create the pages, as you can see for March, and then I have a little bit of inspiration that pops into my head, and you can see here I'm going to go back in retrospect and put some pictures and journaling on the opposite side of my tags. So these pictures are of a spring day on the beach, and if any of you are either in the UK or know of the weather in the UK, you will know that quite often our weather isn't all that good, but we love the beach no matter what the weather, and that's what my journal post will be about on this particular tag. And this one is all about spring, and one of our favourite walks in spring is through a park in Elveston, and this is Callum quite a few years ago now, because he's 17 now, looking very wistful in amongst the irises, and I will journal about that on that page. And this one is going to be all about Disney, as I told you before. So this is Callum and my husband Ivan posing in their Monster Inc. hats. And so you can see on this particular tag that I'm going to need to cover up some of that detail in order to be able to journal. And I wanted to add a little bit of white to the border that I've created. So I'm using a Pitt big brush marker in order to do this. And then just redoing those border lines, because the pen that I used originally was more water-based, and the white pen washed it away a little bit. I need a piece of paper to fit into the area that I have left to add my journaling. I'm going with white because white is a recurring colour throughout the design, and I cut it wrong, so I'm going to measure it again. Hopefully I'll get it right this time. So hopefully this time it will fit. And then I'm ready to do that journaling. I don't always do this immediately, but I'm going to give it a go this time. And by using the piece of paper, I can always, if I make a mistake, remove it and stick another piece on. So just journaling about a memory, something that we've done, and it just makes my journal a little bit more personal when my kids come to look through this in the future. So I really like the Tim Holtz challenge, and I've played along for quite a few years making tags, But I think from now on I'm definitely going to do journal pages in some form or another, and I will show you at the end of the year exactly how to turn this into a journal. It might actually end up being 2 journals. Looking at the thickness of the spine already, I might divide it into 2 6-monthly volumes. But it'll be a lovely trip through lots of different techniques and lots of different styles, as well as the memories that I've added to each of the tags. So you can see it's how different each page is, and it really is a really nice way to get out all your mixed media stuff and create something different on every page. So if you want to play along with Tim's challenge, or perhaps you just want to follow my challenge and have a look at some of my pages and make similar pages for yourself, please feel free, and I would really be happy to know that I might have inspired you to make a monthly art journal book of your own. So I am going to say I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the share button, of course, because it just helps get my videos out there and make sure that I have company and I'm not just talking to myself when I put my videos on YouTube. And I have been really busy lately, so I haven't had much chance to go online and comment back to some of your comments, and I do like to do that, and I have been pretty good at it until recently. But I just wanted to say I am reading your lovely comments and I do appreciate them, and if you do have a question, I try my very best to at least answer those. So sometimes I'll be answering a lot, sometimes not so much. It depends how busy I am in general. But thank you to each and every one of you for your lovely comments, and I'm really happy that you are enjoying the videos. Now, in reply to some of your comments and your interest in my upcycling projects that I did share at the end of my last video, here is what we have been up to. So this is my hubby and my mum busily trying to take down an old big brick fireplace that my mum was fed up with. You can see the work in progress. Then we had to strip all the wallpaper off, and the walls are a bit naff, so my mum had everything plastered, and here they are looking lovely and smooth, and we've just put that white base coat on ready to start decorating. So this was the first layer of colour, and I really enjoyed this part of putting up the paper and painting. And you can see the curtains have come on, and there'll be a little cupboard in that alcove. Brand new fire, looks fab, and a new suite. So my mum's really gone to town, and I've really enjoyed helping spend her money, of course. And we're getting to the final stages now. We need another little cupboard in that alcove, so mum's got plenty of room to put all her knickknacks back into the room. But this is the upcycle project that will be the cabinet that's at the side of her, so she can put all her cup of tea, etc. on it. Side table, that's what this is. We wanted a little bit of storage as well as obviously a surface to put your cup of tea, and I found this in the local charity shop, and it was a real bargain at £3, and I thought even if my mum doesn't want it when I've painted it, I might even be able to turn a profit on it at £3. So I took it home with me and started painting. I used Annie Sloan chalk paint, and you can see that I'm giving all the flat sides a couple of coats of the pink, and I'll tell you a little bit about the grey in just a moment when we get to another photo. All those inset panels on the door I covered in Tim Holtz tissue paper, and you can see it went on beautifully and smooth. It was really easy to apply, and because it's a little bit more robust than tissue, I got a great finish. And then I highlighted some of those gorgeous butterflies with my Faber-Castell big brush markers. So it really turned out to be a great feature, and you can see on the top here I've got lots of different layers of colour. So the cabinet, where it's grey, has been painted with a pink colour, a light grey colour and a darker grey colour, and then I've sanded it back to reveal the layers, so the pink, you know, peeks through the 2 shades of grey, and it makes it all blend in and match my mum's front room, which you saw previously. It looks gorgeous on the inside too, didn't forget the inside. And this is the whole cabinet. I might change that handle for a pink one because I think the white was a little bit stark, so I've got my eyes open for a pink one, and I'll replace that when I find one. She's really happy with it, and it's in situ now with a cup of tea on it, no doubt. And I was really happy that she was pleased with it, although I did very nearly keep it myself. As usual, there'll be a couple of links at the end of this video if you want to look at other things. I always give you a few suggestions. I hope you've enjoyed this little update on my upcycling adventures, and that you enjoyed this tutorial and that it inspires you to get creative. Until next time, thank you for watching. So my first link is to 12 Journals of 2016. This is the playlist of all the pages that I've created so far, and this one was the very first one, which was January. Now, as well as creating my free YouTube videos, which I share quite a lot of, I do have a few workshops for sale over on my Etsy shop. And this one, with all these gorgeous projects, also features a gorgeous set of stamps from Rubber Dance. So when you purchase this, you get the stamps and you get 10 tutorials from me that will show you exactly how to make all of these projects. And I'm sure will provide you with a ton of inspiration. You know that feeling, you buy a set of stamps and then you run out of ideas. Well, you're never going to do that with this. 10 of my tutorials are going to inspire you, I know, to at least make 2 or 3 projects for each of those ideas. So it soon mounts up and it soon makes sure that you make the most of the investment that you make in a purchase of a set of stamps. What else will you find over there? Why not make a celebration cake with little mini albums inside to mark a special occasion? I'll show you exactly how to make this. The single tier, the 2-tier and the 3-tier. The 3-tier one I've sort of featured a wedding design, so they could be for parties, christenings, Christmas, whatever you fancy, and they all have a little integral album, and that workshop will show you exactly how to make that. And last but not least, talking of tags, this is my tag storage workshop, so please pop along to my Etsy shop and see if there's something there that you might like to craft along with me when you make your purchase. See you again soon.